Well, hi, and welcome once again to Unstoppable Mindset. I am your host, Mike Hingson, and today I get to really have a wonderful pleasure and honor to introduce you to someone who I've known for a long time. Robert Schott lived fairly close to us when we lived in New Jersey. We lived in Westfield, New Jersey, but we both went to the same church, which is where we met. We met the Schotts and others, became good friends, and Robert was a very good supporter of ours, especially helping Karen, because when we started at the church, it was not very wheelchair accessible, and there were a lot of issues to try to make it more accessible, and Robert and others were really helpful in advocating and recognizing the value of that. So he's become a great friend. He's had associations with Rochester Institute of Technology and actually helped get me to do a speech there once. So Robert and I have known each other for a long time. Gosh, if we were to really go back and count, Robert, it's since 1996. So that is 27 years. Long
Wow.
time. I know. Well, welcome to Unstoppable Mindset.
Well, thank you, Michael, and I appreciate the warm regard as friends. That's top of mind, and you've helped create a fascinating part of my life and Erica's life, which we're grateful for. And we were sorry to see you move west, but I know that was all for good things. You got
it was for good things, but we still get to stay in touch. And
yeah,
and one of these days, I hope to be able to get back to New Jersey and spend some time with all of you, which would be good. So we'll have to figure that out at some point. But for now, let's talk about you a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about, as I love to do at the beginning of these things, the early Robert, growing up and all that sort of stuff, and kind of what got you to where you are, at least a little bit, and then we can always go back and talk more about that. But love to hear some of the early Robert stories.
Yeah, and cut me off when we need to pivot. But
okay, I'm cutting you off now. Thanks.
You're a funny man.
I try. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, in fact, I grew up in the town past Westfield, which was Fanwood, nestled by Scotch Plains. I went to Scotch Plains Fanwood High School. I was one of 5 children to 2 middle-class-ish parents. My mom was the high school nurse where I went to high school. I had a hard time cutting class or calling out sick because she knew. My dad
moms always know anyway.
Yeah, my dad actually had a pretty fascinating place to work. He was a lab technician on the Brainiac floor at Bell Laboratories in Murray Hill.
Wow.
I could go on and on about that, but one little thing was the tech across the hall from him handmade the first transistor, which set a whole lot of things in motion. But we mom and dad were around. Dad would go down in the basement and do oil painting, and I mentioned that for a reason I'll tell you. But we were very involved in our school and activities, band. I was big into Boy Scouts. And all along the way, I became very interested in art. And that was, I mentioned, Dad was a fine art oil painter, became professional grade, but he taught me how to oil paint when I was 7 years old and always made sure I was supplied with tools and gear, from wood carving to oil painting and watercolor. So that became a nice side thing for me to focus on, which kind of fizzled out as a creative arts by the time I went to college, where I shifted to applied arts. And what I mean is graphic design was my major at Rochester Institute of Technology. It's interesting. I think about that decision. And when I was in junior high school, I made a proclamation to my family. I said, I don't like TV advertising. I'm going to go into advertising and change it. I'm going to change the world of advertising. And so when I was studying schools, Syracuse University was, one of the 2 that I narrowed down. The RIT was the other. And if I'd gone to Syracuse, I would have been in Newhouse School of Communication, which was more advertising and media focused, whereas RIT was more graphics and artistic focused. But the decision, which was relevant for a 18-year-old, was the ice rink at RIT was on the way from classes. And if I went to Syracuse, it would have been a 2-mile trek. So we make our decisions. It all turns out.
My brother-in-law is in Idaho, and for years was a master cabinet maker. He's now more of a general contractor, but his winters were all controlled and governed by skiing. And in fact, in the winter for many years, he, as an certified international ski guide, would take people to France and do off-piste skiing and so on. But I understand exactly what you're saying about the ice rink, because he was all about skiing and still likes to ski, but he's a lot older and doesn't do the events. And he's also got work in the winter. So responsibilities change, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I learned how to ice skate on my backyard after an ice storm in 11th grade, and I began playing ice hockey pickup with some friends. And I had 2 years to get ready before college, and I actually I got cut from the junior varsity team, but I said to the coach, "Hey, listen, I really want to learn this game. Can I come to all the practices? Can I come to the games and carry everybody's sticks in the water?" And he said, "Sure." And so I didn't miss a practice. And mid-season, I guess enough guys got hurt or quit, or I showed progress. He put me on in a game. He gave me the last minute of a game, and the only thing I was able to do was when I jumped over the boards, the puck was coming by, and so was the opponent. And I just put my hip out, and I gave the guy a hip check. He went flying, and the game was over. So he said, "Yeah, you're qualified. We need you for the next game."
Yeah.
I ended up with Michael. I had 2 goals and 3 assists in 8 games. So I actually was a producer.
Well, it's always better to be a producer than not, needless to say. So what was your actual major then?
Well, it was called communication design, and it was focused on communicating through graphic arts, and largely the 2-dimensional realm of graphic arts. And I was a high achiever in my classes, mostly A's in what I did, some standout work. And it led to a summer job at a welding products company in the art department. And I remember getting rejected by Texas Wiener hot dogs that summer. And then I went to this agency, and as I was walking out the door, because they said they had nothing for me. "Oh, here's something. Oh, you have to know how to type." So I said, "Holy cow, I know how to type. My mom made me take typing in 8th grade." So I ended up in the art department, go figure. And I was using an IBM Selectric Composer. Knocking out, graphic text writing with that early typesetting machine. And so it was a great, and that summer job, one of our vendors would come in, pick up work, and he ended up at the end of the summer saying, "Come work for me when you graduate, and I'll help you with your homework for the rest of the year."
God does provide, doesn't he?
Oh, it was pretty funny.
Yeah, well, there you go. So you graduated. When did you graduate?
That was 1981.
Okay.
And I was a really busy student, between a little bit of ice hockey and academic work. The artwork was very time consuming, but I also was a pretty high level student leader on the campus. And that led to some pretty fun things too. So I was pretty harried. I, really had to burn the candle on both ends a lot of the time. But in 1981, I had that job offer, which I took, and they put me on the art board to do graphic arts. And there was a small boutique. There was a dozen people doing business to business communications, which included business slides, industrial videos, other graphics and advertising materials. And it turned out I was actually not very good as an artist on the board on demand. I was a good student, but it didn't translate. And so getting to the quick of it, they went into computer graphics. There was a machine called Genographics that allowed us to make business presentation slides instead of using the old graphic art and Codalith and other kind of build your slide business that way. And they put me in charge of them. And within 3 years, we had 7 of these machines in 2 locations running round the clock, 7 days a week. And it was a grind. I think I discovered the physical limits of sleep deprivation, which is not a healthy thing, but
no,
I did it. And that's what was probably the first thing I ever became expert at in the country, maybe further, making these slides and supervising and training, a team 24/7.
So how long did you stay there? So this was after college, right?
Yeah, so I was there for 7 years.
Wow. Okay.
And I'll mention one thing about a large part of my career was, in reflection, I'm trying to coach my own young adult children, don't fall into the same trap. Maybe I didn't really have the aspirational goal in my mind like when I was in junior high school. But what I did do was accept the next job that somebody offered me. One, because I was ready to leave, and two, it was a good job offer. But it didn't, after doing that 3 or 4 times, it didn't ever really align with where maybe the root of my skills or passions lay. So a lot of years went by, just 3 7-year stints. Just yeah, I'll take that job, and I'm going to have children. I need a professional job, and I need benefits, and I'd say I took my eye off the market, what I was really maybe meant to be.
Right. So you went off and you took other jobs. And so where did you end up?
So the sequence was I left. We were doing business slides for the Coopers and Lybrand accounting and consulting firm, and I was making the earliest of its kind slide presentations for 401k plans in the early 80s. And from that, I got to work with Coopers and Lybrand. My first job, I was working with Coopers and Lybrand, and they said, why don't you come over here? Because they liked what I was doing, producing their 401k stuff. So I learned how to be a communication consultant, the full gamut. It was writing and directing and strategy at Coopers for their human resource advisory group clients. And sure enough, in the 401k plan at Coopers, they had JP Morgan investment funds. And when they brought those funds in, I got to know the funds, and we communicated to 20,000 people about those funds. And eventually JP Morgan said, why don't you come work over here?
There you go.
So I went over there, and then, each time I would still have a relationship where I left, which was, kind of unique.
Well, but good. If you kept a positive relationship.
No burned bridges. It was natural for me to move on. And the Morgan thing was in their marketing group, helping to communicate the value of these types of 401k plan funds that other companies would put into their 401k plans. And so it was kind of there that I moved into another role where they formed a partnership with a company called American Century, and we formed a partnership in retirement plan servicing, and I moved over to that side of the business. But things didn't really go very well after a while, and I was getting frustrated with the work environment and the work I was doing, and that's what led to the spark of doing something different.
Yeah, so you decided you really needed to do something different than working in those kinds of environments. And did you have an idea of what you wanted to do and where you were going to go?
Well, it's interesting because there was no real physical track to making something happen that would put me in a new place, but there was a seed of an invention idea I had to pursue, and that was really the mission. Can I take this idea, get it far enough along, and then from there it was the idea: could I license it to a big manufacturing company? And so the inspiration was in a day of wallowing in my corporate anxiety. I went upstairs, and you remember my daughter Carly. She was 7 years old in 2001, I think it was, and she was playing a certain way with her Barbie dolls. She was making rooms to play with her dolls across the floor with cardboard bricks, and I just went up to watch her play. That was my release. And I said, "Hey, Carly, I wonder if a toy exists where you can build walls, and you don't have to, I can get something official." But it was a Sunday afternoon, and I said, "What? Hey, let's go downstairs and draw what this toy could be." So 7-year-old Carly and I went downstairs, and we started drawing this idea of connecting walls to make dollhouse rooms. And I said to her right there, "Okay, this is all I need to know, that this is something I have to pursue, and I'm going to work really hard to get this product made for you. And that's what kicked off the invention sprawly walls back then.
So basically, though, were you working for someone else at the time, or did you decide to do this full time, or how did all that work?
Yeah. So initially I was still working at JP Morgan Investment. And at one point I got laid off.
Mm-hmm.
Another fellow, that they were rejiggering things. And of course that happens. But they gave me a generous severance package. And I said, oh, holy cow, here's my moment. I'm going to go full blast on this toy idea. So I'd been working on it for a year. Now I had this open time with some, compensation to cover my expenses. And I went hard at it. Now, in the meantime, I was anxious. So I ended up pursuing 5 other part-time things. I got a benefits consulting job, and I was dabbling with these other things that were really distracting and frankly, debilitating, because I couldn't get anything to stick to make additional money. And to have the free time to work on the toy. That aside,
what was Erica doing?
She's been working ever since you've known her in occupational therapy.
So she continued to work.
Yeah. So
that helped some.
Yeah. I had the severance, so that was keeping
that helped too.
But I also didn't know if I was going to have another job at the end of it. So I had to continue thinking about how to make money if the toy thing doesn't come together really fast. But in that period, I really refined the concept. I filed for design and utility patents on the mechanical element of the walls, the way they would connect together. I created a logo and branding, and I created a packaging design. I made prototypes, built models for the kids to play with, ran focus groups with groups of little kids, and all the proofs of this really cool thing were coming through. And through, as a friend of mine likes to say, it's not serendipity or accident or luck, it's intentionality. Mm-hmm. And when you have really crisp intentions, some things kind of can just happen, and out of the most unexpected places. And that happened. I ended up getting a meeting with Hasbro. A college friend of mine at RIT was like the Tom Hanks at Hasbro. He had a lab where he'd make stuff for the inventors. So he introduced me to the creative guy, and they said, yeah, we really like your idea, but it's not really for us, at least not at this time. And let me back up a second. When I was in the outplacement center at Morgan, a former client, then friend, said, hey, talk to this guy, John Harvey, and he'll coach you on your transition, because he started a free coaching transition network out of Maplewood, New Jersey. So I called John, and he said, Robert, what do you really want to do? And I said, oh, I really want to make this toy. And he said to me, hey, listen to this. 3 months ago, I was at a think tank session. I might get the details fuzzy here, but it was the heads of innovation from Nike, somewhere else, and Mattel. Mm. And when you're ready, I'll introduce you to the head of innovation at Mattel. And so after my Hasbro meeting, I called on John. He said, yeah. And he made the introduction, and through another couple things, I got a meeting with the creative director for Barbie at Mattel, the biggest toy brand on earth. Right. And I got an hour. It's like, when I left the building, the young lady said, I don't know how you got in here, because people like you don't. Joe told you stuff about Barbie you probably shouldn't have, because it's proprietary, but he really liked what you came up with. And I'll share that walking out of that building was the singular highest work moment of my life. And nothing has topped that yet, even though the deals didn't turn out. Just the sense that I made an impression to this big company as a novice, said, man, I'm really able to do something different.
So when did you have the meeting with Mattel?
That was, I think, late spring of 2003.
Okay. So that was a ways ago. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years.
But did you have a basic conceptual design, or did you actually have a model at that point?
Oh yeah, I had the prototypes. I had play models. Everything was, in a condition that was acceptable from a toy inventor for a big company to take it on. And I didn't make any errors about anything beyond what I knew what I did. I didn't say I knew how to price it or manufacture it or anything like that, which other toy inventors would have known more about. But no deals came through. And I solicited all the companies, Lego and K'NEX, and I went to FAO Schwartz and Toys R Us, and in fact, the last meeting I had was with the head of brands at Toys R Us. And that was through an acquaintance, a friend of mine who I worked with in my first job out of school. He introduced me to the head of brands, and I met there, and Susan said, "Oh, Robert, I really, really like your idea. I can't work with you because it's not real yet. I need to be able to product to put on the shelves. But go back to Mattel, tell them they got their heads in the wrong place, because this is what we need on the shelves." And I'll spare you the expletive that went with that. And so, here was another validation from the biggest toy distributor on earth about my concept. And crazily, I kind of got burnt out, and I need to get a new job. And I let it go. I just had to let it go for a while.
So what did you do?
Well, two things happened. One, the realization that I knew I could do something different. I thought about what else I had made around my home. And in fact, it was in the year 2000 for Halloween, I had made out of hardboard and red cellophane giant cutouts of cat eyes that I hung in the windows upstairs. And with the room lights on, they lit up like a giant cat was looking out. So I thought, holy cow, there's an idea. Maybe I figured I can get that done myself. I don't need to sell the idea. I'll just get after it. And so I worked on it for 3/4 of a year. And then I talked to a friend. I don't remember if you remember Brian Jenkins and Cindy Jenkins from the church.
Mm-hmm.
Brian was a printer by trade. And I said, "Hey, Brian, what do you think of this idea?" And in the same call, he said, "Hey, I was just drawing a pumpkin that would light up to put in the window." And we agreed to go into business together. And it took us 2 more years to figure out how to make them. And we ended up with an outfit in Green Bay, Wisconsin that agreed to work with us. And a little thing that I learned along that way was never admit your deficiencies on something. Always present yourself as confident and professional. And this big company that served enterprises like Procter and Gamble allowed us to come into their space and dabble with manufacturing this printed window poster on big wide plastic sheets on a 150-foot long printing press. And we pulled it off. We made a poster that worked. So now I said there was 2 things. That's one track in it. I'll tell you more, but at the same time, I needed to get back to day job with income. And the fellow that I got laid off with from Morgan said, "Hey, Robert, I saw a posting that's made for you." And it was with Merrill Lynch. And I put my resume into the black hole. And the next day I had a call. That never happens. And 3 days later, I had an interview. And I remember the second part of that interview, the hiring manager took me back to the first interviewee, and she said to the second one, "Hey, did you give this guy an offer yet?" So it was a slam dunk. I got back to work right at the end of my 15-month severance. So that all kind of worked out nice.
But you did keep on dreaming, which is part of the whole story, of course, which is great. But you did go back to work. And that worked for a little while, at least while Merrill was around.
Yeah, well, kind of, they never really went away. They got, partnered up. But I worked there for, I think, 6 years. And this is how you can do things sometimes in life it's creative thinking. And I said to the boss, "Hey, look, I had a bunch of bad things happen with the poster business after we had a tremendous, start. We ended up in 3 years with $1.5 million of sales, and we were getting attention by the biggest enterprises in consumer brick and mortar stores. But then sadly, Brian passed away in 2009, and I had to take on the whole thing myself. And I approached my boss and I said, look, I got to leave. I got to work on this. And she said, well, don't go so fast. We need you here. How about if we give you reduced hours, but still keep you on benefits? And I said, that works. So I went from 70 hours a week to 40, kept my benefits, and then I worked another 40 a week on the poster business.
Back to sleep deprivation.
Yeah, well, that was easy street from the earlier years.
Right.
So I did that for another year, and finally I said, no, this isn't going to work. And I cut out, and I worked on the poster business full time for 5 years, which was had diminishing returns. The world was changing, and there was a lot of obstacles that I had to overcome. Amazon was starting to come into play, and the big box store, all my wholesale accounts were drifting away, and it was just a mess. So I ended up going back again through a fellow I worked with at Merrill, said, hey, come work for us. And I won't get into that because it's my current work, but that's where I've been for 7-8 years now at the next corporate gig.
Several things that I react to, and the most significant to me is no matter what, with all of the job changes, and I don't know that I would say all of, it's not like there were such a huge amount compared to some people who can't hold a job. You moved from place to place. But one of the things that I find most striking is that you kept really wonderful relationships wherever you went, and whenever you left, you continued to have relationships, and that's been very supportive for you, which I think is really cool. A lot of people don't do that and burn too many bridges, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, thanks for recognizing that. I hold friendships or business acquaintances from all the roles I had, and I'm happy about reconnecting with people and reminiscing. But they've also come into play over time. At different points, I reach out and say, hey, I know you're doing this now. But that was, there's a 40-year relationship from that first, a few of them that I've been able to go back to currently and say, hey, let's talk about this thing I'm working on.
And there must be ways that you're obviously benefiting and helping them as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, clearly, by definition of what this podcast is all about, you are absolutely unstoppable in mind and so on. Give me a couple of examples in your own mind or from your own perspective of how you've been unstoppable, maybe a small one and a big one.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a couple small ones that are more recent. I'll just stick to the more recent because it shows I still have the ability to persevere. And it has a lot to do with a lesson my mom taught me was you always have to finish what you start. And I learned that, when I was 5-6 years old. She wouldn't let us quit something at school because we were unhappy or didn't like it. We had to finish it. And so I got into, for fun, making big snow sculptures out in my front yard. And I've been doing it in our town of Cranford for over 30 years. And I did them at college and back in high school. In 2020, maybe it was 2021, there was a big blizzard. And I'd been waiting to do this particular snow sculpture of Abraham Lincoln, half scale. So half scale is 15 feet tall. And I had gotten skilled enough to know how to prepare my drawings, and I built a wooden form to fill as the base. And we had a convergence of things that I need. One was a big snowstorm. 2, it has to get warm afterwards because I mold and build. I don't carve. And I had to have the time. So this thing started on a Sunday afternoon, and I got to do this. This is it. This is the moment of truth. And so from Sunday afternoon, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then some nights after my work job, and then all day Saturday, I worked on Abraham Lincoln, and I realized that it was probably over 6 tons of snow that we moved. I spent 35 hours sculpting, carving, and I had a bunch of helpers. And it was magnificent, and it attracted national media attention. And the beautiful part was it landed right on Lincoln's birthday when I finished it.
Do you
So,
have pictures?
yeah, I do. I have some good pictures of it.
Well, if you have a picture or an article, I'd love to have featured in the podcast notes.
Yeah, I'll absolutely send that. But here's the kicker, and I didn't tell a lot of people that week. That Sunday when I started, I had body aches and a fever. And I said, I have to do this. This is the moment of truth. Well, I didn't find out till Thursday that I had COVID. So I was climbing ladders and lifting snow, 6 hours a day, changing clothes 3 times because I was sweating so much. And it was so hard to get up in the morning and get at this thing, but I did it. And so I guess that's a good example of a small thing, getting it done.
Not sure it's so small, but I hear you. And it was, you said 14 feet tall?
14 feet tall. Yeah. Of Abraham Lincoln nestled in his chair, looking out from the, Lincoln Memorial.
Right.
So that's an unstoppable. I'd say, pursuing the window posters I'm citing things that I feel really proud of an achievement that I can look back on fondly and say I really got something good done there. And I think that, the window posters I've been doing I've been working on it for 20 years, 17 in business, and it's been it was wildly successful when we got going, and it's had a lot of setbacks and been losing money for 10 years. So it's something that's kind of weird because I can't even get out of it. I couldn't sell the business, I couldn't sell the inventory, but I'm straddled with some debt from it and from having things I just don't want to throw away. Yeah. So every year it's all online, and I sell them online, and I make some money. It just about is covering expenses now. So back to Unstoppable. During the pandemic, I'll say I had the good fortune of being able to cut out 3 or 4 hours a day of commuting to New York City. And I said, all right, I got to get this toy made. And I picked up the sprawling walls again, and I got serious about pursuing it to the finish. And to the fast forward, last November, I got product in hand. I took it from further engineering, prototyping, manufacturing, packaging, patent filings, marketing, and I've been working on its sale since last November. So 20 years later, or more, it's coming to fruition. Now,
go ahead.
Let me add a point here, because when I said I was going to make those window posters, I said, all right, I'm not giving up on the toy, but I'm going to make so much money from the window posters, I can afford to make the toy someday.
Uh-huh.
Well, I just told you I've been losing money on the posters, but what finally occurred to me a year ago was, holy cow, I got the value and benefit of experience from learning how to make a product, bring to market, to make the toy. So the outcome was I didn't make a lot of money to make it, but I earned a lifetime of experience to know how to make it. And I think that's pretty cool.
That's worth a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, how do you make a barcode? I don't know. Well, you have to figure it out. So every part of bringing your product to market from scratch has these learning hurdles.
You go to the bar and you make a code.
Yeah. You go to the bar, you drink, you talk to the guy next to you.
That's it. It's done.
You know how to make barcodes. So now you got your answer.
Exactly. Seems easy to me. Well,
just on that, Michael, I was experimenting with making glow-in-the-dark window posters. So I went to Green Bay to do a glow-in-the-dark test. And just in my travels, I met 3 more people on the airplane in the airport and at lunch that day who were in the glow-in-the-dark business. So intentionality, I talked about what I was doing, and I do glow-in-the-dark paint. That all happened in one day.
Wow. As you said, a lifetime of experience, which is something that is priceless. Yeah.
I'll put a cap on that one. I'll say that, maybe not financially, I haven't blown it out financially, but no. I'm really rich for the experience.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Well, so what exactly is happening with Sprawley Walls then today?
Well, I had envisioned pursuing direct to consumer through e-commerce only and using virtual communities to help create viral interest in the modern way of exposing a product. And that's not going like I envisioned this past 9 months. It was disheartening to see even in a few years, how that realm has changed and how much harder it is to reach out and create attention. And on a shoestring budget, haven't been able to engage at a higher level where people, for 50 grand, they could help make that happen. But in the meantime, I was working with a person who was critical of me spending time on the idea of networking. And I said, because he was helping me think through some of the marketing stuff. And I said, I'm going up to RIT. I was invited to go to the hockey game. I'll be in the president's booth at the arena at the campus. I'm going. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm going to make the trip, use up my time. And he said, why are you going to waste your time showing something that's not really ready for, I'm going anyway, fella. So I went, and guess who was in the president's booth? Well, I mentioned I was a student leader at RIT, and the director of student affairs, who I became very close to and a lifetime friend, had eventually become number 2 at RIT as the secretary to the Institute. And he was in that booth with his wife. And it's like, holy cow. Well, of course, I brought my prototype. So I'm showing everybody in the president's booth my toy idea. And then Fred pulls me inside and says, hey, Robert, I don't know if you know this, but I'm on the board of directors at the Strong National Museum of Play and Toy Hall of Fame. If you want, I can get you a meeting there. Oh my God. Oh, like it was the perfect storm for networking. And yeah. I got my meeting. So here I had an hour with the chief curator of the National Museum of Play, and he's been in this business for 35 years, who looked at what I was doing and said, man, this is such a great story. And I think the trouble with you getting exposure with your product is because people don't know what to make of it yet. In fact, Robert, you've invented a new category of play. And I was like, well, that is not, because he couldn't think of a comparable to what I've created. And furthermore, they said, we'd like to bring this product into our live play lab, where inside the museum, kids can come and play with, free play type of building toy systems.
We'll learn a lot from that.
Yeah. So I think they're putting it in there in a few weeks in reality. And they're also bringing my toy out in public outreach to children who have troubled circumstances and may not have an environment where they live to be able to play. So they bring these children to places where they expose them to just pure play, just for the sake of playing and the creative and collaboration that goes with that. So I'm grateful to be turning my product into something bigger than just me making a toy to sell, but actually influencing young children.
But hopefully it will turn into a real product that sells, which is always a good thing. But, one of the things that I react to and keep thinking back on is Hasbro, that had no interest in it with things like G.I. Joe and so on. I would have thought they would have been very interested in Sprawley Fort, but I guess not.
You're spot on. When I went to Hasbro, I didn't come with just the girl doll wall system.
Right, I understand.
I came with the Army system. So I brought my G.I. Joes, and I had camouflage wall panels that connected together to make, fort scenes. But yeah, they didn't see it that way. No, one of the things they said was, well, that's all good and well, but boys like to build and destroy. So that was a funny line.
Yeah, especially, all the way around. Well, clearly, though, everything that you're doing, you continue to move forward, and you get sidelined along the way, sometimes from circumstances over which you have no control, but you still do, which I think is great. What puts you and keeps you in a mind frame of being unstoppable and just continuing to move forward, because no matter what's happened, you've had a lot of things that have been setbacks, and a lot of people would just be held back by that. But you've continued to move forward, and you've done it very intentionally and in a very positive way. How does that work?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I'm going to go back to the root of a painting I did when I was 7 years old, side by side with my dad. And it was an apple with a sugar jar on burlap, and he painted his version, I painted mine. And I remember getting it done, and maybe didn't reflect on it back then, but I reflect on it now, that I created a piece of art that I can look at and enjoy. And we got that done together. And through the pursuit of art, the creative arts, oil painting, sculpture, watercolor painting, and other things, I find the greatest joy for myself looking at, if I can look at something that I did or without someone else did and see enjoyment and continuous enjoyment and keep coming back to it, like a good movie, like The Wizard of Oz. I can watch that every time. To me, that describes what art is, that it has this appeal that you can continue to enjoy. And you don't get there by not working at it, right? So I think when I see something I want to do and get done, I need to see it finished, because I want to sit back and look at what I did. And it, despite many obstacles, like with the window posters, there was a storm there was a hurricane that wiped out Halloween one winter, and a blizzard the next Halloween. And then my warehouse got hit by lightning, and all my product deliveries were late. My partner passed away, and all of these things that just bang on you, but you just got to keep going. So I think presently, like with what I'm pursuing, the side gig, if you will, I have this vision of what it would be. And there's something bigger that I realized last year, but it's so big that it overrides any doubt that I have, or fear, or even the skepticism of others, and even the regard for risking money on it. I come to realize that, money saved isn't helping me create and invest in my own pursuit. So I've let go, and I don't let it get me down like I would have, 30 years ago.
Well, so how do you view money today, or how is your attitude about the whole issue of money changed? Both from a standpoint of you personally, but you've obviously been in companies that specialize in that stuff. So you must have a lot of ways to answer that.
Yeah, so it's kind of a funny contradiction. I teach a lot about saving for retirement, yet I'm spending a lot of my retirement savings. I'm investing in my future is what I'm doing. I discovered I had to really make it happen. I had to use what I have, with the belief that it will work out and I'll be better off for it financially one day. Certainly the three high-end college educations at a time when I thought money was going to really be flowing from the window posters and my work, that was a drain, as it is on anybody today, the way college expenses go. Yeah. And then just trying to keep my head above water with the poster business that's been, technically losing money. I'm resolved that this is my way to pursue something bigger in my life, and I'll figure it out. I'll just keep working. I'm so resourceful, and I have so many ways that I could earn money for the next 20 years if I have to, that I don't like it that I'm in a spot, but I love that I feel hopeful and confident in my abilities.
But you've made the commitment to do it. And if it means that you have to put some things on hold for a while, and do more mundane or more things that are not directly in line with what you want to do,
right,
you're going to get to do what you want to do, and you'll let some of the other stuff be a part of what you do to make that happen.
That's right. I'll just finish off on the toy story, if you will. I have two big events coming up in the next month. I was accepted to a media showcase. I'll be on Pier 60 in New York City on September 12th. So by the time people see this, it might have been well past, but the showcase is for the best toys of 2023. And while I didn't make the cut as a best toy, they accepted me to be present, which is, I think, a nice credit to that I'm recognizing what I have to be in the presence of major media as well as social influencers. And then I was also accepted on the last day of this year's toy fair at the Javits Center in early October for Toy Inventors Day. So that didn't come easy either. I had to qualify, and I'll be in front of major manufacturers to potentially get back to the idea of licensing the product. So I've got 4 tracks. I can sell direct to consumer. I can make the product and sell wholesale. I can pursue other avenues like homeschool and teaching networks and Montessori schools where play and free play is the thing, or I could make a licensing deal. So all these are on the table right now, and I'm making some of those big opportunities happen.
Have you thought of doing anything like trying to go on to Shark Tank and showing this to the world through that?
Oh, I've thought about it a lot, but I've also tried out for Shark Tank with the poster idea. And there's a lot of reasons I don't want to do that. A lot of reasons why I won't do that. And I won't get into that, but I think I can pursue avenues through my own.
That are better.
Maybe I could put it this way. I've discovered how I can make tracks doing things. And I think maybe other people think that's their only avenue.
Yeah.
Success. And I don't believe that for me. So there's a good answer.
Well, and clearly in part it's a business decision and you want to make it the way you want to make it. So it was just a question out of curiosity, but it makes sense, to at least ask the question, and you thought about it, and that answers it, which is great.
Yeah.
But you continue to be resilient about pressing through and finishing whatever you start. I think you've hit on it some, but why is it that you are so firm at being able to press through and continue to work? What keeps you going, and always moving forward like you do?
Well, I think when you first introduced the idea of me being a guest, I had this theme in my head, which was real, that for some bit of my career, I didn't feel very interesting anymore.
I said you were.
What?
And I said you were interesting. Yeah.
I know, but I'd go on vacation with 4 other families, and these other guys were all entrepreneurial. I had nothing to talk about in my work life that would be of any interest at the dinner table. So it's like, I got to be interesting again. But anyway, I think there was lessons growing up about endurance and achieving things. I was a Boy Scout, and we camped every month of the year, whatever the weather was, wherever we went. So, 5 below zero in a tent with no floor and a summer sleeping bag, you have to somehow get through that night, and you learn where your limits are and pain points. I made Eagle Scout. At college, I was in academics and sports and student leadership. And, I actually, the one and only time I sought professional help was at school at the counselor to say, I'm falling apart. Help me put my pieces back together again. And the coaching I got there was really valuable. And I encourage anybody who's feeling in a bad spot to take advantage of the resources out there. And then that first job I had, it was 12 people, and it was all for one for all. We wore all the hats. When we moved to a new building, they said, we're going to come in Saturday and work on the wiring together in this new building. So the boss was running around teaching us how to do wiring. It wasn't really legal, but that's what we did. So you learn how to solve little and big problems, and nothing is an obstacle when you have that frame of mind. And so when I get stuck on a business problem with my side gigs, I hunt down the answer, and I find people who know the answer, and I get coaching and make alliances. And so there's an answer to it all. It's just a matter of how you pursue that. And the other part of that is you can set up a business plan and say, these are the steps we're going to get done. But you can take yourself off of that anxiety by saying, I'm working on this thing to get done, and then the next thing, or maybe 3 things at once, but I'm not going to worry about where it is 2 years from now, because I can't do that. I have to work on what I can figure out today.
Okay.
And I've gotten really good at that. And, setting expectation. Like I thought I would be blowing out my product by June, and yet most of it's still sitting on the shelf. All right, dial down my expectation, slow down what I'm trying to get done, work on some bigger game things. And here's the bigger game, Michael, I want to make sure I get in. A year ago, I realized that I invented this toy, but then I discovered this world called free play. And I've been studying the meaning of what free play is. The definition is children given a place to play and things to play with that are non-electronic and without parental supervision. And sing alone or with a group or with friends, they will discover how to keep an afternoon going through trying and failing and trying and failing and trying and succeeding and solving each other's problems. And what I've further learned is that there's incredible power in the development of a child through this kind of activity. And there's some important studies that Mattel has done with Cardiff University and Melissa and Doug with Gallup that are proving how children will mature with greater empathy and social skills when time is devoted to free play versus playing by themselves or electronic play. And I realized I have a new direction. That's the bigger game, is getting my toy out there, but helping children in their free play development. And,
isn't that really part of what the museum really referred to when they said you developed a whole new way to play?
Yeah, it fits right in there with all of that. And so I'm becoming a student of that realm. I'm a novice, but I can see a third act for myself in pressing forward in becoming maybe a leader or spokesperson in that model of play someday.
Yeah, so writing about it and getting some other things to help enhance your credibility would make sense. Writing about it, speaking about it, as you said, and going to places and talking about it would make sense. And that takes away a little bit from the toy, but maybe not. It might be certainly something to explore.
Yeah, and I think it actually feeds the toy.
It does feed the toy, I think.
Yeah.
Which makes sense to do. Well, so for you, you continue to move forward. For you, what do you think about your journey now as opposed to 20 or even 30 years ago? Do you think your journey has really changed? Has your mindset changed? Have you changed?
Well, I've certainly learned a vast amount in pursuing these things. And like you said, I've given up a lot of things too. It's hard to stay inside on a gorgeous sunny weekend, doing bookkeeping and accounting and inventory management for things. But I think my motivation has never been higher to see something come to fruition. And my understanding of how important it is to our society is feeding that. And to also know that I'm getting the attention of important players in what I'm pursuing gives me great hope. So I'm going to continue with my corporate life. In fact, I'm actually trying to shift that a little bit more too around the realm of community-oriented financial literacy. And I may have opportunities where I work now to make that my work. To take all I've learned over 40 years in financial education and actually be out in the communities leading programming. That's a picture I'm painting for myself that could come around in a couple of years where I am. But pursue the toy, pursue the childhood development theme. But personally, I'd like to free myself of the amount of work I'm doing if I can make it financially viable and get back to my basic artwork. I finished an oil painting last year that got recognized with a second place in the Union County Art Show here in New Jersey. And I started that one 40 years ago. I finished it last year. I want to create new things now. So I need to find the time to get back to my arts, work on some of my athletic ambitions and other crazy adventures. I have room in my system for off the wall things. So that's where I'm at mentally and emotionally. So.
Well, and you continue to move forward, as I said before, which is great. And you continue to clearly be as unstoppable as one can imagine. So what's ahead for you?
Well, immediately it's just keep doing great work in my day job. Is that what you mean? And then I'll just keep chipping away at the toy, manage my expectation on the toy, keep finding avenues because I can't work on it full time. Just find out what I can get done but aim bigger. I need to think for a while on what's the best bigger hits that I can get to make it come really to life. And in fact, this morning I approved the banner I'm going to bring to the media and the Toy Inventor Showcase that illustrates the future of the toy. And what I mean by is I've got 5 phases of development that take it from a single-sized 8 by 12-inch panel that connects with others to 16 different sizes and 4 different palettes of colors, and eventually mechanical elements like pulleys and levers and drawing and graphic applications to the panels, and maybe even LED lighting. So I'm painting a picture of the future so others can see it with me. What I've got today isn't really describing what it could become, and I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah, and I think, as I said a minute ago, doing some writing about it, really composing some things and putting it out in places might very well be helpful and actually lend a lot to credibility. I think people need to be drawn into your vision, and why you can only do so much of that with an actual model of the toy, writing, right, talking about it, speaking about it, having slides that show it in action, whatever. I think those are things that will help pull people in to realize what visionary ideas you have. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when it goes into the free play area in the museum and how all that works. Yeah, because that's going to lend a lot of support to what you're doing.
I completely agree on the visibility through my own initiatives, whether, it's certainly joining you, but other situations like this I'm going to pursue. We're going into a little higher gear on our social media visibility of the product with examples and videos. And I've got social media influencers creating content. So I'm in a big content build phase, but I like the idea of the writing side. It's right now it could be, reflections of what I've learned about childhood development and free play. Even though I'm a novice, I have something to say and point people to where they can learn more. In fact, when I go to this showcase, I'm putting something into the showcase gift bag for all the media. It's going to include a rolled up window poster and then 2 sheets that describe both products. And there'll be QR codes that lead those who see my sheet to the studies by Mattel and Melissa and Doug, and a survey I've started for parents to tell me about what their children's play patterns are today. It's an open survey, and I'm encouraging all parents with children 4 to 11 to complete it. That helps inform me about what current children are doing and what they need next.
When can you get some photos of kids actually playing with the toys?
I've got a bunch of photos. A new one came in today, but I probably have 50 or 60 photos and 10 or 20 videos.
I was going to say, in some videos, putting some of that up, I would think has to be helpful.
Yeah, and most importantly, I want that content from strangers. I don't want it from people I know.
Exactly right.
And there's some beautiful things coming in. Michael, I did some street fairs in the spring, and I'm going to do one more in Cranford in October. And I set up a play space for the kids. I invite them to play. And the spirit of what I've created shows up. One kid joins in, and then 3 more come by, and then they're all playing together and they're creating things. But there's surprises. Like, I think they can build walls, but all of a sudden this kid takes all the sticks that hold the walls together and makes a sword out of it. And another kid takes the walls and builds a ramp down off the table with a structure that he engineered to run his cars down it. So all this innovation is what this is about, and the kids are showcasing it at the street fair. So I've got all those photos too.
That's great. Well, and put them out. I mean, those are all cool things. Well, I want to thank you for being here, and I'm excited for you, and I'm excited by what's going to happen, and look forward to hearing more about it. So definitely keep us in your, and on your email list. But one of these days we'll get back there to visit, but I really hope that it all goes well for you and that this will catch on soon and people will start to get really excited about what you're doing. And I agree. I think it's really interesting that although you intended it as walls of a house, kids are doing a lot more with it, and so much the better that they do.
Yeah.
Future engineers.
And it, the key selling point about it, or a couple of them, is that it integrates and connects to Lego. It connects with Connects. You can put Avery removable papers that you run through your printer to make wallpapers, and you can draw on it with Expo markers. And the best part is you can collapse it back down into the box in like no time flat.
Right.
And parents love that you can put it away into a little box.
And it's not messy when you do that.
No, just don't forget to pick up the little clips, because they hurt your feet just like little clips of Lego.
That's fair.
Yeah. Michael, thank you.
This has really been fun. Well, you're absolutely welcome. And this has been great. I really appreciate that we finally got a chance to do this. And you need to come back in a little while and let us know how it's going and tell us about the adventure, because it clearly is an adventure. And I hope that you listening have enjoyed this. If people want to reach out to you, learn more about you, what you're doing, and so on, Robert, how do they do that?
Well, I just set up a new email address yesterday morning to robert.schott, SCHOTT, at Bopt Inc. It's BOPT Inc.com. And a little funny there, Mike, I'll close with this. I named my company Bopt because I was told it's how I spelled my name when I was 4 years old.
There you go.
From Robert to Bob to Bopt. But 2 weeks ago, I was going through a folder my mom left for me of my drawings from when I was 5. Just 2 weeks ago, I saw these for the first time, and I discovered I actually spelled my name BOPPT. And my sister said, well, don't worry about it, Robert. You could just say Bopt is the nickname for the longer version, BOPPT. So
yeah. So it's Robert.Schott or just Robert Schott?
Robert.Schott at Bopt.
SCHOTT at BOPT.com.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, please reach out to Robert. We've got some social media links and other things that are in the cover notes. Please send me a picture of Abraham Lincoln. That will be fun to add. And anything else that you want us to put in there, we definitely want to do and be supportive of you. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear what y'all think. Please feel free to email me, Michael H.I. at accessibe, ACCESSIBE, I can spell, .com, or go to our podcast page, www.michaelhingson.com/podcast. We'd love to hear from you. And Robert, for you and for you listening, if you know anyone else who ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset, you've heard a lot of the stories that people tell. You've heard Robert today. We'd love to hear from you about people you know who ought to come on Unstoppable Mindset as well. So please let us know. Please give us introductions. We appreciate it. And so once more, Robert, I want to thank you for being here. And we really appreciate your time late in the evening in New Jersey.
I'll see you again in the spring.